Check, check, check. Good. All right. I'm late. I'm sorry. Usually right on time. This time we're getting started about half a minute late. Thanks everybody for joining. So I'm Peter Schavacher. Couple of things. One, the chat in LinkedIn is so low. So if you want to chat with me, if you want to ask questions or whatever, best thing to do is go to Discord. I've posted that a few times. If you don't have it, reach out to somebody who's a member of the Nearshore Cyber community and ask for it. On the subject of the community, I'm killing Circle. Not for everyone, just for us. We ran it for a couple of years and it was good. But it was hard to drive traffic there, even though we had like 2,200 people. There was a great hue and cry to go back to Discord, and Discord got better. We had bounced out of Discord because there were security problems. We got raided and it was creepy. So I dropped that for Circle, but Circle turned out to be really expensive if you want to do it right. And Discord cost me like $20 a month, and that matters. So we're back on Discord. The Discord is called Nearshore Cyber's Internet Tendency. I don't know if you can Google for it yet, but hopefully we'll see you there. There's a channel called event-chat. So Nearshore Cyber's Internet Tendency channel event-chat. Susan, if you are on now, if you could drop an invitation in LinkedIn, that would be super, because I won't look at the LinkedIn thing until the end. I might run out of time. All right, well, let me get into the topic at hand, because that's why we're here. The title of this one is Your AI Adoption Plan is Upside Down. No surprise. Oh, actually, I can see the LinkedIn. Cool. Hey, Taz. Hey, Gish. Couple things. Use the LinkedIn for networking. So if you want people to connect to you, like say so in the LinkedIn chat or on the Discord chat. LinkedIn is still a social networking platform, not just a TikTok, as best I can tell. Anyway, all right. This is going to be about AI and how we adopt it, but particularly as it relates to GRC. The GRC world, from a practitioner's perspective, has been in the sort of like weird mixed slump where there are a ton of people who are smart and well-trained, and a lot of them quite experienced or having trouble finding work. I am in the business of getting people work in part. But I want to talk about how GRC is actually holding the keys to unlocking a ton of AI value. That's the gist of this thing. Now, a little bit about me, if you're not familiar with Nearshore Cyber and what we do. I've been in cybersecurity for about a lot of years, about 3 decades. Been doing cybersecurity for a long time. Did a couple of, like a stint and a half as a CISO. The half was after an acquisition where I took over from somebody else. But I've done that job, and I've owned, SOC 2s. I've delivered GRC consulting for other people. These days, I run a company called Nearshore Cyber, which is staff and recruiting out of Mexico, Philippines. I'd like to do some more Greece. There hasn't been a lot of demand for it, but we really like Southern Europe. Nearshore Cyber is focused exclusively on non-US talent nowadays. And the reason for that is, and this is something I'll talk a little bit about today in terms of my experience with AI, essentially AI assisted product called Project Aramis, or just Aramis for short. This is not an Aramis talk. This is a Nearshore talk. But it's important because we have decided to stop recruiting in the United States. So Project Aramis is, among other things, a talent assessment program, talent assessment product that allows you as an individual to understand what your capabilities are, and so you can position yourself better. Thanks, Taz. So you can position yourself better in the market, but also to pinpoint your gaps, so you can save a bunch of money on training and a lot of time. I cannot, in good conscience, recruit people to whom I'm selling that product. And so we're not going to be doing any recruiting of talent in the United States anymore. If you're in the U.S. and you want help with your career or finding work, we have Discord. It's free. We have Aramis, we charge for it. If you're outside the United States, basically you get Aramis for free, but we have to have a recruiting order behind it. So that's how we're going to avoid the ethical quagmire that comes with looking like we're double dipping or doing pay to play, which we were accused of early on, and I had to figure out how to slice through that Gordian knot, and that's how I'm going to do it. But so we operate two businesses, and one of them was built on AI. Now I am face to face with compliance problems. I have to go through like vendor risk assessments because we have an enterprise version of the product where we can assess an entire security team or division or potentially a whole company for security businesses. So I'm up against the challenges that come with GRC in the ways that a lot of people are, but at lightning speed and with a product that I built myself. What that suggests is that, and I'm not unique, right? There are a lot of people doing this kind of thing. I just happen to be more aggressive about it. And I also happen to come from a business domain that has been sick for a long time. And my goal is to fix it or replace it with a product that I built using the kinds of AI assisted development that we're going to talk about. So, yeah. So there are two different ways to look at any kind of large scale effort involving people. There's top down, there's bottom up. I am very much, as if you know me, I like bottom up, but top down has its place. In the end, you got to have both because the big kids, the people with the C titles, are the ones who allocate resources. They are responsible for representing the interests of the shareholders, of the owners, and all that stuff. And typically, they have an understanding of a company that nobody else has below them. As a CEO who also does a lot of the work, I just happen to know that I have perspectives on the business that nobody who reports to me will ever have in the same way. At the same time, the people on the ground have a perspective that is just as valuable. We need to take both into account. So how do we do that? Right. So this is going to be divided into 6 parts, but those are sort of grouped into 3 sets of 2. First is really about defining the problem. What is the adoption model and why is it problematic? The phenomena of what I think it was Gartner came up with the term citizen developer, or at least they publicized it. I really like that term citizen developer because it suggests that there is a professional developer, non-professional developer relationship. I don't like the term amateur because it suggests that, well, for one thing, an amateur, an amateur refers to love, right? People who love to do things, and professionals love to do things too. The best professionals are also amateurs. So that didn't quite fit, but citizen developer kind of fits. I'm going to talk about the way the attempt to apply modern development practices to the citizen developer and why that's not going to work, why the opportunity is what it is, and why it's so gigantic for GRC people and the GRC field and how it's going to expand. And then I'm going to talk about what you could do, like what you could do today. And there are going to be some things that I want you to do today. And then stuff that you think about for the next couple of days and do Monday, because today's Thursday, March 19th, 2026, 10:09 a.m. Now, raise your hand or make a noise or throw up an emoji or something if this looks familiar to you. You've probably seen this before in other domains. This is not just the standard AI adoption playbook. It is the standard IT systems or business applications or whatever it is playbook. And it starts with somebody at the top decides that something is a priority, in this case, AI. They put a steering committee together. The steering committee evaluates vendors because typically you don't have the know-how or the capacity inside. You run a pilot with the vendor. There's some training that gets rolled out. Time passes. Now, at each of these stages, like 6 months is perhaps the longest stretch, but it usually takes at least a month for the executives to get together, to assemble the committee and so on. So this is like a year and a half before you get to the point where you figure out that nobody's actually going to use the tool, the product, or the methodology, or the training that you used. It takes a long time to figure out that things are going to fail. This is akin to Winston Royce's first cut at Waterfall, 1972. I think he published that. You can still find it. There's a PDF of his original paper. What people don't do with it is read to the third page, which shows that he believed in iterative development. It didn't stop at simple linear development. But it's based on some traditional old notions, and it never really worked all that well. Now, shadow AI is a term that I don't particularly like, but it has a kind of moral connotation that I think is useful, even if I would object to it. It's happening, right? Shadow AI is an awful lot like shadow IT, and we can measure it, right? If you have like Zscaler or Netscope, pay attention to that thing, right? You can find who is attempting to use AI products and how they're using them, and who's using them, who's able to reach them successfully and who can't, how much time they spend on these kinds of things. But looking at the numbers, these come from Netscope and BlackFrog and IBM. Netscope early this year said that about half of individuals in their customers were using personal AI accounts, not personal ones. There is an important distinction to be made between personal and like free LLMs, and enterprise ones or paid ones. The free ones, a lot of the time, will use whatever you put into them for training eventually. They don't do it right away. It's not like instant. Training happens in batches. But those are the ones where the more the risk is. And so it's happening a lot. That's not to say those people aren't using the enterprise products too, but you see additional risk being taken there. About 60% of employees surveyed by Black Fog, it's not Frog, I thought it was Frog until now. Black Fog said, yeah, it's risky, but it's worth it. And I think a lot of us feel that way. Like the negative risk is outweighed by the positive risk, and risk has positive negative. About 27% had put in employee data at some level. Some of the most active users of AI are in human resources, and so that happens. Managers as well, and they'll have employee data. Interesting figure from IBM. I need to dig into this more, but it's plausible that $670K additional cost per breach. Whenever there is a breach, and they talked about an awful lot of them, the cost of managing that breach goes sky high because there aren't that many people who know how to deal with a breach involving AI, and there are a lot more questions that wind up being unanswered. So the kicker is this, and is literally the kicker on the slide. This is rational behavior in a system that hasn't provided an alternative. People are using AI products of various kinds, and they are developing and they are improving or attempting to improve their productivity. There's no stopping them. And we went through this. We went through this with Shadow IT. It's how it is, right? Now, I am part of the time a recruiter. Sometimes I'm a consultant. Sometimes I'm a contractor. But this one hurts, right? You're a recruiter and you built a candidate screening prompt in Claude, just a prompt, not like an app. Like I think there's an assumption that everybody's building like complex multi-agent systems. This applies to simple use of with the standard LLMs, and you share candidate PII with a consumer AI, a consumer AI. There are people who will say that it is naive to claim that the frontier model companies are honoring those statements that say we will not use information here for training purposes because it's paid. I'm inclined to believe them. For one thing, they don't really need it. So much of what is entered in these things from on the consumer level isn't useful, and then the professional level is just too dangerous for them. Like they have a lot at risk these days, and so there's a difference to be made between a company sanctioned, company paid, or anybody paid LLM and a free one. But you need to roll an analysis for a client, right? So that might happen. Financial analyst connecting ChatGPT to quarterly actuals. Smart, right? I mean, this is something you do once a quarter. You don't do it every day. You're not practiced at it, but you want to create something that's repeatable once a quarter. Sounds like a really good idea, except that the credentials are in plain text scripts. Or my experience with this one was there was a period of time. It was only recently that GitHub defaulted to private repos, and I had a repo where I had stored an invitation to Circle, and those Circle invitations are essentially keys, right? They don't, they're not meant to be secure, but they are keys. And there's a company called GitGuardian that like scans GitHub, and if they find that you have stored a key there, they'll notify you. And they're trying to sell you. They sold me. But I did that one. Now, it wasn't too long after that GitHub changed the policy to default to private, which is smart. And I'm grateful for that because it saved me some trouble on down the line. But there are still plenty of people who don't know the difference between public and private GitHubs. GitHub repos. You have the operations manager who wants to automate invoice reconciliation in AI. Again, like really, really smart use case. That's drudgery. Operations managers should be focusing on probably things other than invoice reconciliation. But what happens when a change gets made and it doesn't make sense? What happens if you need to roll back a transaction? What happens when there's suspicion of fraud or malfeasance? Where are the logs? Where's change management, right? So in this case, we're talking about something that looks a little like a production application, and maybe it runs in, somebody's like a Lambda function or whatever, or like I use render and it's running on a web service. Or maybe it's simply a task that gets run out of Claude Code, right? How is that done? And this one's near and dear to my heart. So you're a compliance analyst. If you are in GRC and you've done anything with AI, generative AI, you probably built some kind of crosswalk or regulatory mapping tool. What happens when the LLM, invents one? This showed up with Aramis. So a lot of the work that I did, like that went into building Aramis, was in mapping between the NIST framework and typical job role definitions using like publicly available data and my own job descriptions with nearshore, and then on down the line. Now, we are currently on NIST 2.1. NIST 2.0 had 11 different workgroup roles that pertain to the DoD and intelligence community. Those were taken out in 2.1, right? So those were shifted over to some DoD thing that I don't care about because I don't do that stuff. So it went from 52 to 41 categories. Claude, from time to time, will reintroduce the old stuff. So I have to make sure that I say, like, use NIST 2.1.0, and here is the Excel file. I've had to do that from time to time to make sure that it doesn't drift to the old one, because it's trying to help. Sometimes it's just trying to be fast. Other times, I have found that in mapping, in the generation of questions to workgroup roles, that if it couldn't find a workgroup role for the question, it would invent a workgroup role, because the goal was make sure that every question is mapped to a workgroup role. And if it couldn't find one, it would just invent one. What did I do? I had to create a set of question and TKS integrity checks that run once a day, right? And so, once a day, I get a notification saying like it's clean or it's not clean. And if it's not clean, then there's like another script that goes and checks it. By the way, these are Python scripts. So this happens, right? And it's going to be happening more. Now, fortunately, the LLMs are getting less prone to hallucinations. Gemini is absolutely terrible at hallucinations. The bigger the context window is, it seems like the more prone the LLM is to hallucinations. But the bottom line is you need to put your own guardrails in place. So a lot of this is about not enforcing guardrails, but suggesting them. Some more numbers. If there is a reasonable case to be made that we should just use the practices and tools and standards that we apply to IT and to professional developers, to citizen developers. And here's that breaks down pretty early. For one thing, according to, again, this is Black Duck, it's found that 21% of developers, professional developers, bypass AI policy. They just ignore it. And it's probably worse than that. 40% of code is never security tested. Security people are under this, it turned out to be naive assumption that line-by-line code review is not just important, but gets done. There's a history to code review and the requirements around it. It starts around 2012. And the idea was that, anytime you are about to merge a PR, you're supposed to do a code review, or preferably get a bunch of people around a table to do that. The fact of the matter is, and it's not hard to see how this breaks down, what's the ratio of reviewers that you need to have relative to the number of people writing code? It's like 1 to 3. So there's simply no way to do code review, really. So it doesn't get done. So all the talk about, do you do code review? Just don't believe it, right? Now, computer-assisted code review, sure. And in fact, not long ago, it's like a week or two ago, Anthropic released a code review product. It costs like $15 to $25 per PR. Now that turns into real money really quick. One of the things I'm not going to talk about much in this talk today is cost control, which I think is at least as serious a problem as security and compliance. But there are tools available for checking PRs. There is, and I want to see if I can do a special session on this. There are a handful of companies, one of which is StrongDM, that operates a lights out software factory. 3 people develop all StrongDM products. 3 people. And they've said proudly, and I think they should be proud, they never look at code. They focus on test scenarios, on test integrations, like basically fake integrations they can test with, and really good specs. And the idea is you feed the specs to the system, make sure that the scenarios are written so that the system can do its own testing. And you come back a couple of days later and you have a set of features, right? Rather than pretending that we're going to do manual code review, which again, doesn't really happen. 45% hit by CI/CD security incidents. Gartner says so. I didn't read that one. But it's kind of a neat figure and I like it. So point is DevOps isn't actually working that great still after, 2026, this is 15 years, right? So what makes us think that we're going to be able to apply this to people who are just getting started? Like it says there, if it doesn't work for trained developers with purpose-built tooling, purpose-built for developers, it is structurally incapable of serving a population that's, let's say, 4 times larger, and that it was starting from zero. What the citizen developer knows is their business, is their work, their tasks, but they don't know all this stuff, right? So, we like to talk about this idea of shifting left, but what if there's no left to shift to? That's what we have right now. So, that's the bad news. But if you're in the business of solving problems, pretty much everyone is in the business of solving problems. That's why people pay us to solve those. This is really good news, because if citizen development needs a different model, we can get busy and build careers on that. And that's what I'm hoping to spark here, right? So here's the other thing. There's a constraint involved with citizen developers, which is that they have jobs. And what we don't want to see happen is we send again, let's say it's an internal recruiter, somebody in human resources, who again, I think are some of the people who would benefit most from this and are paying a lot of attention to AI. You spend your 40 hours a week on your TA job, and you start learning AI tools and someone notices, this one has the urge. Let's empower them as a citizen developer, get them to training. Let's teach them DevOps, right? But to do that for developers took a long time. So what we don't want to do is see this person whose job is recruiting, staffing for the company, and have half of their time or all of their time being turned into AI assisted development or product development. That's not going to work. If you do that, two things happen. One, you're going to burn them out. And if you built stuff with AI like I have, you're burnt out right now because it is addictive. It is really addictive. If it doesn't have that effect on you, you probably shouldn't be doing it because you're not in the right frame of mind to create. But it's really easy to wind up doing half of your day job, right? So you're not effective at that, or turning development into a second day job, in which case you're doing 80, 100 hours a week and burning out. And so now there's supposed to be, through increasing productivity, a reduction in the amount of workload, which should then create more capacity for developing tools to do the primary job. Great, but then where's the ROI, right? If all we have is like this zero-sum game where it's like, I have my 40 hours a week of work, I develop tools by stealing 10 hours, I reduce that workload by 10, maybe 20 hours a week, good, but we want to see more value created than just that. And if somebody wants to work out the math, you're probably Andre Karpathy. So we don't want to take people out of those jobs. I've seen that before where people are valuable because of the job that they do. We take them out of the job and then they start to lose that knowledge, right? They stop being recruiters. They just turn into bad developers and nobody wins. So the right approach is one where you preserve domain expertise, where there's a kind of balance and harmony between the day job and the dev job, and where we scale according to the capacity and interest of the person within the business, not some development pipeline. Again, like this can't run like like DevSecOps or whatever. So one way to do it is this. This is similar to something I'm working on with a client right now. I'm helping somebody with, I won't mention the name because it's confidential. But we needed to perform a dual, sort of two work streams. One of the work streams is create design guardrails mainly for the citizen developers, but also take into account the pros, right? Because you can't just do one and not the other. But the part that's just as important is encouraging citizen development, finding the people who are eager to do the work and create and improve the business, because that's what I'm going to give any company that has knowledge work, and everyone does, competitive edge, is to find the people in the business and get them to express that in the whatever way works for them. So I came up with this idea of like driver's licenses, and I did this because I have a car license, I have an ATV license. At one time I had a learner's permit when I was 15, 16. So I envision is something like this, and use whatever you want, like use whatever scale you prefer. Use a belt system of like white belt, yellow belt, green belt, black belt, whatever. Go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, use whatever scale you like. But I would suggest have a scale. And the first case, like baseline level 1, it has a constraint, which is it can't involve a human. Like this is the testing level. This is where the employee is given access to certain tools that are pretty much guaranteed to make sure that they don't do too much damage, but without coaching. Next level, supervised building, right? This needs to be, I think, something that takes like 30 minutes to an hour. A little bit of a conversation, creating a little bit of a relationship, and also making sure that there is an understanding between the employee and IT AI that they are welcome, right? That this is not something they should do in secret or in private, that they should be communicating and sort of introduce them to a community of developers. Next level, the Class B license. They get to deploy things independently. That involves then periodic audit, trust, blah, blah, blah. Now, most people are going to be just fine at the assisted use level. Like, this is the co-pilot. And you can get a ton of value out of these things at that level. Like, this slide deck was me writing and taking notes and collecting conversations from transcripts with conversations I had with people, and then writing some more and dropping it into Claude and saying, what are the topics here, right? And you've seen my writing. Like, it sounds kind of like me, but it's actually written according to a style guide based on what I want to read, right? And then eventually, like, I made these slides with Claude, right? I suck at making slides. Claude's great at it. I can edit the slides as I go. And this went through multiple iterations. But none of this is like AI agents in the sense of like OpenClaw. This is not that fancy. And it's not nearly that dangerous. And it's pretty valuable, right? So I was able, also as an example, to take some transcripts of meetings I had with a client where we talked about scoping a project, create a statement of work outline, tweak the outline, pull some stuff out, put some stuff in, and produce a statement of work in the course of about an hour. It probably would have taken me several days to build that, and I probably wouldn't have started. A lot of what I do with AI at the sort of like assistant co-pilot level is just get past the fear that I'm going to be able to do it. And let's give people that opportunity, right? So that's assisted use, supervised building, independent, and audit. For black belt, you're teaching, right? And this is how we start to scale through internal and external communities of practice. So typical big organizations can have somewhere around like 500 to 1,500 DevOps, SREs, whatever. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of expense. It's a lot of complexity. But now everybody's going to be doing this. And there are two ways you can look at the problem. You can look at it as, oh my God, we're all screwed, right? There's no way to control this. Or you can say, like, there are ways to work with this. And the value that is generated some of that is going to have to be extracted to pay people to do work, right? And so if productivity of any given individual employee is, let's say, $100, or let's say $100,000, excuse me. And by enabling people to develop and build on their own, they're able to increase that to $1 million over the course of 2 years. It stands to reason the company would want to spend a couple $100,000 on making sure that those people can do this safely. So, this is all like cocktail napkin math, but I think it's worth doing, and I think it makes sense. Point is that, if you look at this as a threat, well, I would encourage you to find another career, right? Because you need to start looking at this in terms of opportunities to help people and create value. This is one of those rare cases where security is considered an asset, but the people in the security business need to look at it that way. We are going to get left behind like we were with cloud. All right. So we need to also, and this is going to get weird. Policies are not going to make sense real soon if they make sense already. Policies tend to be big. They tend to be broad. Now, there's policy in terms of grand policy statements, and those are the high-level documents that are statements of management intent, which is what they taught me in ISACA school, right? And then you have the more granular expressions of statements of management intent, which go down to the level of, like, when I started doing this, it was firewall policy or identity policy or whatever. We're going to have to get closer to the people. And so a good guide to that can be found, or a good primer is in the writings of a guy named Paulo Freire. If you want to know more about Paulo Freire, find us in Discord. Paulo Freire was a teacher, and he taught other teachers in Brazil, and a brief stint in Chile when he was exiled from Brazil. But to me, the most important thing he taught was that if you were going to teach anyone, you must first study the student. You have to understand the student as an individual, as someone who has agency, who has wants and needs and capacities and shortcomings that are unique to them. Now, it doesn't mean that we stop working by categories and broad sort of in terms of like departmental stuff. But we also don't have to anymore. Like creating a policy for 1,000 people takes X. If we can tailor those policies according to smaller cohorts or even individuals using AI, let's do it, right? And so in the end, like GRC's future is personal, not organizational. We need to get comfortable with talking to individuals and understanding them and what they're about, not just like spreadsheets with controls, sort of nauseating. We have to stop being cops. I don't like cops. If you're a cop, I don't like you. I don't like to be told what to do. Most people don't like to be told what to do. The ones who generate the most value hate being told what to do. They want help though. They want coaching. They want accountability, but they want accountability that's based on what they're trying to do and the value that they want to create in the world. And that's coaching. Now, what does a coach do? You join a gym, you pay your, I don't know what people pay for gyms anymore. They're $30 a month or $100 a month. And you go for a couple of weeks and you don't come back. Or you learn some good form and then you stop paying for your coach and your form goes to pieces and you injure yourself, right? You don't usually injure someone else at the gym, although I've seen it. Coaches are appreciated for their caring and individual attention, right? Even if you're in a class full of people, the coach is scanning the room, trying to figure out who needs help, who's doing well, who's not, who needs to be praised, who needs to be, who they need to suggest, like, tone it down, right? But it means that like GRC has to shift from being the people that the users and managers dread coming around to ones that they look forward to coming around, who they reach out to. That's going to be really hard, right? A lot of people get into IT because they're at least a little bit antisocial. Cyber made that worse. GRC's mixed. Some of the, actually, I'm going to take this a little further. Every GRC person I've ever met, I liked. Like GRC people are likable, perhaps because the expectation is that they're going to show up wanting to fight, right? So they have to be cool. But I think there's a natural tendency to want to build relationships. It's just like we need to change the perception among people who are building software, many of whom have never talked to a GRC person in their lives. All right, so this is another way to think about getting the money. Honey, in the old days, you'd spend more on compliance, insurance against bad outcomes. Cyber really was thought of as simply, but GRC in particular was something that you did at the end, and it wasn't something that you really considered at the beginning. That's showing up for me right now. I'm probably going to somehow have to get a SOC 2, and I have no idea how I'm going to do that. Now, I do know, I'm going to ask Claude. I started last night. It's like, you're in for like 50 grand in expense. I didn't think about that when I started, right? If I had a coach telling me like how to build this as I go, I would have saved like 50% of my time and gotten more sleep and spent less money on tokens, right? The way we need to be looking at this now is like this, invest in the enablement layer that converts shadow IT into sanctioned productivity gains. So one of the ways we can keep score is count the number of cases where somebody tried to use a non-sanctioned application, and don't punish those people. What those people are doing is they're signaling their desire to improve the business and improve their work. One of the early steps in the discovery phase of any AI adoption engagement, I'm talking to you consultants, is like get the web application access logs, or the web access, like find out who runs Netscape or Cato or Palo, whatever Palo uses for web application monitoring, and find out who's trying and who has tried, and call them in. Stop calling people out, right? Most people want to do good work, and we just got to find them and enable them. All right, so here we go. Like, this is what you do. Start building something. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't even have to be fully automated. Now, if there are ways into the world of like scheduling things and stuff that runs somewhat autonomously. Don't feel pressured to do that stuff. Look for examples. One of my favorite sources of information on AI these days is called How I AI. It's a YouTube channel and podcast. I recommend the YouTube channel because it's a bunch of demo. It's run by a woman named Clara Vo. Has a product called PRD GPT. Like, she comes from the product management world. She has a thing that generates PRDs, product requirements documents. Pretty basic on the surface, but it has a lot of depth to it. It's pretty cool. But How I AI is all about examples of how people started using AI and how they're using it now, what tools they use. And one of the things you find is there's great diversity. It's not like everybody who's using Cursor or Claude Code. There's a variety, and the applications are really cool. Like, there was somebody who talked about how one of the problems they had at their office was when there was a sporting event, cost of parking would go through the roof, because it was the parking garages would vary their fees according to the number of people who were coming for parking. And so she created an application that would look at like public calendars for events in downtown San Francisco, and then basically warn everyone when they should consider taking BART or stay home, right? Pretty cool. So lots of different applications like that. Another one that I really quite like is the AI Daily Brief. That one, they say it's like everything you need to know about AI in 5 minutes, more like 20 minutes. It's totally worth it. And it's about every day. There's another one called This Day in AI, which is produced about every Thursday, every other Thursday. It's funny. And it's very sort of like wry, but smart. If you want links for these, join the Discord. Learn the failure modes. So there is a lot of talk about how AI goes wrong. I think it's actually a bit overdone. There's too much repetition. There's too much grandstanding. There's too much like, look how smart I am. Somebody please hire me. But you're gonna need to figure out how to winnow that down and understand like data leakage, access graph, hallucinations, but the kinds of things that tend to generate hallucination. Like I mentioned, that there's this kind of, people take it on faith that a big context window is better. It's actually worse when it comes to hallucination, but not necessarily. And then the other thing is like, these can be mitigated. Like I do it all the time. I don't do it perfectly, but nothing's perfect. And then think about that in terms of GRC. There are some documents that are about as much fun to read as, I don't know, they're not fun to read, but NIST has the AI RMF. There's some really nifty stuff from MITRE Group. There's MITRE Atlas, which is interesting. The trick is like, how do you connect it to the real world? This is why you got to build stuff. Like I've learned more about applications and application security and AI. Actually, set aside AI, like the other two, in the past 5 months of Project Aramis than I did in like 25 years of security or IT, 30 years in IT total. The education I got from building and putting stuff on the internet that mattered is immense. So do it. And if you are afraid or if you're not sure, well, all you have to do is ask the LLM of your choosing, like, where do I start? What can I do? Give me some ideas where I'm going to run into trouble. Walk me through this step by step. I have no idea what I'm doing. That's my favorite prompt because it'll do it, right? Another thing you could do is come to our Discord and ask. Find collaborators. This is so much easier if you're doing it with friends. Now, learn to translate. Talk about this thing to people who understand it and people who don't understand it. Right. Now, the writing that I do is all AI assisted, but it all starts with my notes. It starts with my outlines. Usually it's like me on my phone at 2:00 in the morning in bed, like when I should be sleeping, not able to sleep because I got ideas, typing into a Claude prompt and saying, tell me what you think of this. Right. And so using whatever LLM as a learning partner or as a sparring partner for ideas is really helpful. And don't feel bad if people are like, hey, I wrote that. Tell them to fuck off. Like, really? Like, who cares if it was written by AI? The only question that matters is it good? And is it yours? Right? But if it's good, it's good. If it was written by somebody else, cite the source. You can always ask the LLM, cite every factual claim or anything you got anybody else, put it at the bottom, spell out the URLs, and give it to me in APA format. APA, for those people who don't know, the American Psychological Association actually created one of the formats for citations, and it's like I use it all the time. And you'll see in what I post, if you go to the bottom, it's either the bottom or it's on a longer site if there's a character limitation. They do it every time, and I'll go back and say, AI, are those real? Are they accessible? Are the links good? And are they valid? And about half the time, the LLM's like, oh, good question. This one's baloney. That one is too. Do you want me to pull them out? I'm like, well, if you can't cite the source, don't use it. And sometimes I'll run it through another LLM. Like there's something I think I'm going to use for a long time. Maybe I'll write in Claude. This is my kind of my daily driver. And then I'll try it again I'll have ChatGPT 5.4 is excellent, by the way. It does great writing these days. I'll have that double check it. There was a period when I had a Manus account and I would have it do it too. It had dumber models, but it had lots of multi-agent stuff. It was kind of doing something like swarms early on. And so are you going to be perfect? Who cares? We're not going for perfect. We're going for good. Position yourself as a coach, not as a gatekeeper. I think there's already an urge out there to do this. We all want to be appreciated by the people we're trying to serve and not seen as some kind of punisher or enforcer. But just keep doing that, right? And as you learn, share. And as you find other people in your organizations that are interested in this kind of stuff, form little clubs. We created a thing called Calling All Vibe Builders. Peter Holcomb and I did. It was 4th of July week. We started. We did this weekly, with a couple of exceptions for holidays, for 6 months. We killed it in December. Why? Because I found a bunch of other people were doing something similar. I'm like, the world does not need another one of these. But we would have people come in who were like, I'm never going to build anything with AI. And they'd see what other people are doing and projects at various stages, or sometimes it's just ideas. And then they come back a couple of weeks later and they'd have a product. And one guy was selling his. I then decided to create Project Aramis because I was telling other people to do that. I'm like, well, I better put up or shut up. So in December, I started working on a public facing version of that, which was really just a way to automate stuff I'd been doing for years manually. But I went for it. And a lot of it was because I was seeing what other people were doing. And I felt like, not all these people are geniuses, right? Most of my friends are smart. They're not all smart, but I'll tell you, the people who seem to have average ability are building more than the smart people. And that's really good news for somebody like me who's not all that smart. So here we are. What the bridge looks like is this. You have citizen developers who have plenty of domain expertise because they're doing the job, they're doing the work, they're doing the recruiting, they're doing the HR, they're doing the legal, they're doing the ops, the business ops. And they're motivated, but they don't know how to talk about GRC. They hardly know what it is. And then you have GRC people who understand governance and regulation and all that stuff, but they don't know AI yet, except in sort of hot takes about either how it's useless or it's going to take over the world. Both can't be true. You need to bring those things together and learn from each other. Like I said, Paulo Freire said, if you want to teach anyone, you must be a student of them. So be a student of the citizen developers, right? That's how this is going to work. So what are you going to do next? If you're CISO, find out who's using AI. Find out if it's approved or not. Try and get it approved. Get to yes. And I would suggest that if you're in a company of size, and by that I mean a couple of thousand employees or more, hire 2 GRC coaches. You're probably going to have to build them. You're probably going to have to either take GRC people who are eager to learn AI and teach them that, or AI people who have some exposure to GRC and fill that in. There are not a lot of people doing what I'm doing. I mean, there are people who know more, I'm not ashamed to say it, Rock Lambros, he's my North Star. You want to know how to do cyber and AI right? Look at what Rock's doing. Walter Haydock, brilliant, scary smart, and has been doing this a lot longer. You don't have to be this sharp as they are, as well informed as they are. Just look at those as examples, sort of directionally where you could be going. I feel like I'm just getting started, but when you're doing it right, you feel like that every day, and you just learn to love it. But appoint 2 people full time, right? If you can only get them part time, fine. But this is going to take a lot of time. But the value is there. GRC built something with AI today. If you're not sure what you need to build, like ask an LLM. If you want to grab this slide, you can take a screenshot of it, drop it in, and say, I saw this in this presentation. This knucklehead from Oaxaca said I should build something, suggest. If you are a business leader, meaning not the CISO, but like CEO, CFO, CRO, one of those C people, SVP of something, just recognize that citizen development is happening and make sure that people are at least enabled at that level 1 tier. Depending on the kind of inherent discipline in the organization, you may have more or less trouble with that, but just like get started with it. Most of the tools that people are looking for exist and have safer failure modes than you think. But get started with that stuff and just keep it lean and tight. If you are someone who's building, if you are a citizen developer, thank you. Right? You deserve support, not just permission. You certainly don't need to be told like you're doing it wrong, because you can't do it wrong. There's too much opportunity at the moment. So this is how you get a hold of me. Thank you, Taz. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Diana. Yeah. All right, cool. If there are no other questions, I'm going to shut this down. Couple of announcements. Again, we are no longer on Circle. It was like $260 a month, and it was really hard to get people over there. And there was a lot more interest in people hanging around Discord. So we're back at Discord. So check that out. If you don't have, if you need an invitation, ask me or ask somebody else around. And next week, Susan Lloyd and I are going to be presenting on something about what do you do when you're ready to give up on a cyber career. A lot of people come to me and they're like, I've been looking for a year. I can't get work. What's wrong with me? And the reality is that the cybersecurity job market is not what it was 5 years ago. It used to be really, really easy to find work. And there was a very sort of high tolerance for everything, right? If you want to stay in it, there are ways to stay in it. But what if you don't? Like, what if you got your WGU degree and your Security Plus and whatever, and you're ready to go, and the market is just not coming? What do you do then? So it's going to be part breaking out of cyber, partly, and as is my habit, I want to look for the positive. I think cyber teaches us things that would be very, very useful in other domains. And so how do we make something out of the investments that we made on our professional development outside of cyber? So I think that's what it's going to be about. She and I are going to be working on it this afternoon. Thanks everybody for coming. I hope you found this useful. See you next week.